Hello everybody, Xanaphar here, and today I'm doing a review of episode 19 of Ultraman Tiga. If you like this video, don't forget to drop a like for this video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the plot. So Headram and Camilla are battling, and Yuna keeps seeing this mysterious man, and then eventually Tiga starts battling Camilla and her goons, and Yuna transforms into Gazelle and gives Kengo some power. And eventually Camilla and goons retreat, and then this man transforms the Kila Ainoan, and the Ultraman Tiga appears because of the Raptor's light. And then Tiga and Tiga team up and defeat the Kila Ainoan. That would happen in the episode. Characters. The characters in this episode are pretty good. Every character find out they basically see illusions, and they basically find out the brainwaves are happening. And that is pretty interesting. Let's talk about Yuna, because she is technically the main character of this episode, and we find out, well, she is scared. Scared of dying, because she saw Gazelle die, and that's pretty interesting. But she affronts her fear and finally awakens Gazelle and uses her power, with the help of her father, of course, and that is very, very great. It was a great scene with those two, and yeah, very great scene for Yuna, so she was good in this episode. Now let's talk about Yuna's father. And he was in this episode, and he was great. It was so nice to see him, because we hadn't seen him for a very, very long time, and it's just awesome to see him. And he right away recognized the Kila Ainoan, and that was cool, because he is from the Tiga universe. Speaking of Tiga, his light reawoke in Ultraman Tiga, and that was so freaking awesome. Let's talk about Kengo in this episode. Kengo was fine. He mostly took the back seat with this episode a little bit, but he did have some good moments, especially with Camilla, because he actually feels bad for her, and that's something I find very interesting. Speaking of Camilla, let's talk about her now. And she was great in this episode, honestly. You can tell how much she hates Kengo with a passion, and how much she misses Tiga so much. She is just heartbroken about it. Even Kengo says she is crying, and that's something I find very, very interesting. I really like how much this villain has so much emotion to her, and that's something I find very interesting, because we don't really see that with villains too much. Headram was in this episode as well, and Dargon. Let's talk about Headram. Headram betrayed Camilla finally, and yeah, started battling her. He don't see her as a proper leader, so he is now trying to take the leadership role. Dargon was also in this episode, and he was one of the first people who broke out of the spell, and that's something I find pretty interesting. And he tries to basically tell them to stop. He's basically being like the parent, the good friend in the middle, trying to tell his two friends to stop fighting. And that's something I find pretty funny and pretty awesome. Everybody else, the captain, Gazelle, and Akito, all came to the back seat of this episode, mostly just repairing the Gut ship and helping out Tiga. So that's really it with them. Characters of this episode were pretty good. Now let's talk about the effects. So the effects in this episode were really great as always. The middle buildings looked amazing, there were so many nice shots, and also the Kila Ainoan looked really good as well. But maybe a bit too smooth. I do think the Avenger suit looked a lot better in my opinion, but the effects were good. Criticisms, I only have one, is when Gazelle finally reawakens and gives Tiga some power. I feel like the music was a bit out of place. I understand with Gazelle's theme, but it should have been more pumping to me. Maybe they should have chosen a new song or something different. What did I like about this episode? Well, Ultraman Tiga is in this episode, and I was so freaking happy. I literally jumped out of my chair, and I started screaming. Much of the nostalgia just hit me so hard. I literally almost started crying. How freaking happy I was just seeing Ultraman Tiga team up with Tiga. It was so freaking cool, especially when they played the Tiga fighting theme. Oh my god, it was just easily the best moment in this show. Something I want to talk about is how did the Erector got a light of Ultraman Tiga? Now, there's two possibilities. One, at the end of Ultraman Tiga, where everybody's light merged with Tiga, or it could be because it was more similar to this way, where in Tiga Dying in the movie, everybody's light brought back Ultraman Tiga, and he could have been one of the characters back there, and that could be very cool. Also, I noticed an Easter egg maybe, where Griddle Tiga appeared. It was very similar to in the Tiga movie, when Griddle Tiga appeared. and as something I thought was just pretty cool to see. So what is my rating and what's my final thoughts on this episode? I freaking loved this episode, mostly all because Ultraman Tiga, because it was such an unexpected thing and I just freaking loved it. So I would easily give this episode a 10 out of 10. I love this episode. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Xanathar is out.